Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty and Freedom House, I'd like to thank you all for joining our discussion on the crisis of political imprisonment and incommunicado detention in Belarus. My name is Katie LaRoque, and I'm Deputy Director for Policy and Advocacy at Freedom House. I'm pleased to serve as your moderator for today's event. It has been nearly 4 years since Belarus's fraudulent election in 2020 and the brutal crackdown on those peacefully protesting the outcome. As we gather today, the Lukashenko regime continues its relentless repression of innocent Belarusians. According to various sources, since the summer of 2020, between 300 and 500,000 Belarusians have left the country because of the ongoing political persecution. Over 3,300 people have been recognized as political prisoners since 2020, and nearly 1,400 are currently behind bars, including journalists, human rights activists, opposition politicians, peaceful protesters, and many others. Political prisoners worldwide are typically subjected to worse treatment than other prisoners and are routinely subjected to deplorable conditions and torture, such as physical abuse, insufficient food, psychological pressure, and extended periods of isolation. They are also frequently denied lawyer visits, contact with family, and access to adequate medical care. To our knowledge, 6 political prisoners have died while in custody in Belarus. This is unacceptable. There are also children under the age of 18 and very elderly people, as well as those with severe medical conditions. The Lukashenko regime is also increasingly resorting to the deplorable practice of incommunicado detention to isolate political prisoners, depriving them of contact with the outside world, including family, friends, and legal representation. We'll discuss this tactic more during our panel. As is commonly said, a political prisoner's worst fear is to be forgotten. The thought of being abandoned by the international community, left to endure an unfair sentence without recognition or support, can be more painful than the physical conditions of confinement. This is why we're meeting today, to ensure that what's happening inside Belarus has the attention of the democratic world. We have 2 incredible panelists joining us today to shed light on this important issue and share their recommendations for policymakers and for us as human beings, which we'll discuss in a second. However, before I introduce them, I'm honored to share 2 brief videos with keynote remarks from 2 powerful champions calling to free political prisoners. The first video is from Ms. Svyatlana Tsikhanouskaya, the Democratic leader of Belarus. According to credible exit polls from 2020, Ms. Tsikhanouskaya in fact defeated dictator Alexander Lukashenko in the 2020 elections and should be the rightful leader of Belarus. Unfortunately, she has instead been forced into exile, where she remains an outspoken champion for human rights in her country. The second video that we will share is from U.S. Representative Steve Cohen. Congressman Cohen serves as the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's Special Representative on Political Prisoners and is co-chair of the U.S. Helsinki Commission. We'll watch those videos now. One moment while we get the sound on the video.
Dear friends, today we gather to honor the brave souls who are unjustly imprisoned in Belarus. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Freedom House, Radio Free Europe and all the participants, including U.S. congressmen, for organizing this event. As we speak, thousands of people are behind bars. Among them are journalists and bloggers, teachers and doctors, activists and human rights defenders, people of all ages and walks of life. Every step you take to reach out to the world and to help our political prisoners matter. Your voices bring hope to those behind bars and their families, reminding them that they are not forgotten. Imagine the heartbreak of a father who hasn't seen his daughter for years. Imagine the desperation of a mother separated from her children. And these are not just stories. These are real people enduring unimaginable pain. Their bravery, their resilience, and their unbroken spirit, despite the horrors they face, inspire us all. Our political prisoners are heroes, and one of these heroes is Igor Losik. 4 years ago, he was jailed by Lukashenko's regime. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison just because he dared to speak the truth, just because he wanted a better future for his country and his family. Unfortunately, today Igor cannot speak for himself, but we can, and we must be his voice. We must fight for his release and the release of other unjustly convicted. And we have to continue what Igor did, to tell the truth. We must continue his fight and make sure that his work and his suffering will not be in vain. Also, we must support the families of the repressed. Many of them are in dire situations, and I am grateful to human rights defenders and organizations like Freedom House for providing emergency support for them. We must ensure that every Belarusian child can soon embrace their parents again. And the regime must know that our fight will not end until all political prisoners are free. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for inviting me to say a few words on the plight of political prisoners in Belarus and the OSCE region and around the world. I am the political special envoy for political prisoners for the OSCE. It's an important responsibility that I've been assigned by the president and I take very seriously. And Belarus is one of the two largest holders of political prisoners, really, with Russia, although Turkey has a goodly share as well. It's been 2 years to the day that Igor Losik was unjustly imprisoned. Since the stolen election of 2020, Belarusian authorities have made over 40,000 politically motivated arrests. And today there are approximately 1,400 political prisoners in Belarus. I had the privilege of speaking to the democratically elected president of Belarus recently, Svyatlana Tsikhanouskaya, a couple of weeks ago at the Helsinki Commission hearing on political prisoners. I was also with her when she received an award from the National Democratic Agency that's concerned about human rights in America. And at dinner where she was honored along with Vladimir Kara-Murza and his wife Evgenia, they were honorees as well, and Nancy Pelosi, former speaker. Svyatlana's husband is currently a political prisoner in Belarus. He's being held incommunicado, and Svyatlana herself, who was properly elected president, would become a political prisoner if she remained in that country. As a result, she moved to Vilnius, Lithuania, where she has rights and privileges as quite a few other Belarusians have gone. During the hearing that we participated in at the Helsinki Commission, which was on political prisoners, we spoke in depth about how political imprisonment and incommunicado detention hinder a free and fair society and the grim realities of Belarusian democracy. Autocrats and despots all around the world are continuing to imprison people peacefully exercising their rights of freedom of speech, assembly, and association. These rights are fundamental pillars of democracy, which should be part of human life. Everyone should deserve to have an opportunity to exercise their rights as free speech without fear of reprisal or incarceration. The stories of those who've been silenced and marginalized and incarcerated for exercising those rights serve as a wake-up call to all for the free world about how fragile these rights can be and how important it is to protect them. We cannot turn a blind eye to the erosion of civil liberties and systematic targeting of political dissenters around the globe. As the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's Special Representative of Political Prisoners, it's my duty and my honor to have a part in ensuring that every citizen's rights are protected, regardless of their political beliefs and activism. I'll continue to shed light on these issues in Congress and abroad. And as representatives of the American people, we must affirm our commitment to upholding the rule of law and safeguarding fundamental rights enshrined in our Constitution and that are in other constitutions as well, or need to be. I urge my colleagues to join me in this critical endeavor as we seek to ensure that political prisoners are afforded the fair and just treatment they deserve, which is freedom. They should be released, and released now. I'm telling Putin and Lukashenko, they may not listen to me, but we've got to keep the pressure on people like Vladimir Putin and Lukashenko. Vladimir Kara-Murza, sentenced to 25 years in Russia, and he's been in solitary confinement, health problems. He told me before he went back to Russia, the worst thing that could happen to a political prisoner is to be forgotten. Never forget.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Ms. Tsikhanouskaya and Congressman Cohen for sending in those remarks. We're very lucky to have their voices and participation in our event today. And with that, I'll now turn to our wonderful panelists. It's really humbling to introduce them. They're incredible women. The first is Hanna Liubakova. Hanna is a journalist and analyst from Belarus. She's a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council and has written about the latest developments in Belarus for the Washington Post, The Economist, and other international outlets. She won the 2023 One Young World Journalist of the Year Award and was the 2021 European Press Prize finalist. Hanna began her career at the only independent Belarusian channel, Belsat TV, which was banned by the regime in Minsk. She later joined RFERL and worked in Prague. Currently, she's working on a book about Belarus. Following the 2020 revolution, Hanna was forced to flee Belarus and later learned that she was on the regime's wanted list. She continues to report on the people's resistance, despite that, and became a crucial voice amid Belarusians, the regime's participation in the war against Ukraine. Hanna, it's really good to have you here. Thank you. Our second panelist is an incredible woman. Olga is also a journalist. Olga Loiko is also a journalist from Belarus. She was editor-in-chief of the political and economic section at the largest Belarusian privately owned web portal called Tutbai. Tutbai was one of the most prominent websites covering the crackdown on protests after the fraudulent 2020 elections. Tutbai has since been shut down by Belarusian authorities, and a criminal case was opened against its employees for quote-unquote inciting hatred and discord and distributing materials calling for actions harmful to the national security of Belarus. Olga herself, unfortunately, was a political prisoner. She spent 10 months in prison. The Belarusian KGB included Olga on a list of, quote, persons involved in terrorist activities, all because she was a journalist. Despite being imprisoned, Olga's resilience continues. She continues her work as a journalist. Since 2023, Olga has been the editor-in-chief of Plan B Media, which focuses on the Belarusian economy and politics. A note for our audience, for our really impressive panelists, if you have any questions for them, there's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and so you're welcome to submit questions throughout our discussion at any point, and we'll save time at the end for your good questions. So with that, Hanna, remember you're both muted. I'd love to start with a question for you. For those less familiar with the situation in Belarus, can you give us a brief overview of how the human rights situation has deteriorated since the 2020 elections? And how did we get to this moment where all of a sudden we have 1,400 political prisoners?
Thank you, Katie, and thank you to Freedom House for constantly raising the issue of political prisoners, and especially to the Lithuanian branch of Freedom House that is helping Belarusians on a massive scale. All right, so let's get back to Belarus and the past years and basically the past decades. I'll try to explain how we got where we are. Since Lukashenko came to power in 1994, Belarus has consistently been authoritarian states where freedoms have not been respected. However, 2020 marked a significant escalation. You might remember that we had these massive protests that were happening all across the country, not only in Minsk, but basically all over Belarus. And they were happening for months, basically from summer to winter. Tens of thousands of people were arrested in 2020 alone. People were shot dead on the streets, and people also died at police stations. Protesters were tortured, again, on a massive scale. And, well, Europe has not seen this level of repression in decades. And I feel that the world often forgets that protest ceased, not because people gave up, but because it became just too dangerous, not only to a personal freedom of a protester, right, of anyone, but to basically their lives, to be outside, to be on the streets. Despite Lukashenko kind of suppressing the dissident, he became really traumatized by what he saw, this kind of massive scale of people protesting against him. Since then, he has imposed revenge on any dissident in the country. We currently have, as it was mentioned, 1,400 political prisoners, and these are only the names that human rights defenders are able to collect and share. Some of the families don't want to, like their relatives to be recognized as political prisoners because it might be dangerous. So the real number might be much higher. People are being arrested on a daily basis, and it did not stop. It's been almost 4 years, and repression never stopped. And since the full-scale invasion, repression only escalated. In the first days of the war, Belarusians went out to the streets and they protested. But on that day, on the first day alone, at least 900 people were arrested. So you can imagine the scale. When it comes to civil society, well, almost 1,400 civil society organizations have been forced to dissolve. Basically, the profession of journalism has been criminalized. 38 media workers are currently in jail. Hundreds of journalists had to flee the country. So it became really impossible and dangerous to be a journalist inside Belarus. What's happening with the regime since 2020? It has been involved in international crimes. We all heard about the Ryanair, like the plane that was forced down to land in Minsk back in 2021. Also that year, Lukashenko was involved in orchestrating the migration crisis on the border and basically threatening NATO countries, EU and EU countries. And Lukashenko joined the invasion. He helps Putin in his war effort, and he helped Russia invade Ukraine. So you see how this escalated. But on the other hand, I'm always surprised and I'm always amazed by the resilience of Belarusians. Despite all of it, despite this propaganda, censorship, dangers, people do not support any involvement of Belarus in the war against Ukraine. They did not support the attacks of Ukraine from the territory of Belarus. They do not support the deployment of Russian nuclear weapons in Belarus that was announced by Putin and Lukashenko. So you see, they do not really, well, to some extent, they don't trust propaganda and they don't want to be a part of kind of whatever the regime is doing. So I think this is going to be this kind of optimistic and more hopeful side of the past 4 years. Otherwise, the regime has escalated the situation to a level never seen before.
Thank you, Hanna. I'm often struck by the fact that I feel as though the Belarusian people are held hostage by the Lukashenko regime. And I appreciate what you say about how we know of 1,400 political prisoners, but the number might actually be much higher. It depends on our access and the family's comfort having their names being associated as a political prisoner. And so thank you for helping to set the stage. Olga, the next question is for you. I'm mindful, you have a very impressive career as a journalist from Belarus, and I hate to ever sort of limit one's identity to the fact that you were a political prisoner, but for the purposes of our event, because you went through this yourself, I wonder if you could share a little bit about your personal experience as a political prisoner and help those that are listening to understand what conditions are like, what's a normal day like for a political prisoner in Belarus.
Hi, everybody. My name is Olga Loiko. I am terrorist and refugee and former political prisoner. Now, almost every Belarusian journalist has at least one of these titles. I was extremely unlucky to collect all of them, and extremely lucky to be free and to be out of Belarus now. So, as you told, in 2021, I was chief editor of the politics and economics section of the most popular online news platform in Belarus, TUDBY. The website was read by 65 of all Belarusian internet users, with around 200 million monthly visits. After 2020 presidential election, mass protest started to rise in the country. The authorities believed that especially journalists contributed to this outbreak of protests and responded by launching a crackdown of independent media. So on May 18, 2021, the authorities blocked TUDBY, accusing it of publishing so-called prohibited information. 15 TUDBY employees, including myself and several other journalists, were detained. After 10 months in prison, I was released together with a few colleagues, but without dropping the charges. Fortunately, I was able to leave the country. In March 2023, TUDBY chief editor Marina Zolotova and director Lyudmila Chekina were sentenced to 12 years in a penal colony. I'm still in the wanted list in Belarus. A criminal case has been initiated against me and my colleagues under 3 articles of the criminal code. I'm also in terrorist list. So you can imagine Al-Qaeda terrorists and Belarusian journalists are in one register in our country. So I can't go back, and I had to leave there in Belarus all my property. So, and when I say all, it means all, everything, starting from my flat and ending with a cheap gold ring my father gave me as a present when I was 17. And my father died when I was in prison. So it was a very important thing for me. But now it is in our investigative committee. So, but I can mention the only one important thing, that when I was in prison, I understand and I feel this support from the international community. You know, when you are in prison, the most important thing is to find support and to maintain hope. And I knew that I was recognized as political prisoner, and I knew that people all over the world are interested in our lives. So political prisoners' lives matter. It was very important.
Olga, thank you. And I will say, if you're a terrorist, I'm happy to be associated with you. I can't believe it, but I appreciate you sharing your story. And moreover, I'm just so impressed that you continue to be a journalist despite, everything that you've been through. I think you're an incredible and very brave person. So I'd like to shift slightly to the subject of incommunicado detention, if I could. So as our name suggests, we do want to focus on this specific condition of incommunicado detention. When we say incommunicado detention, what we are describing is a phenomenon where the imprisoning regime cuts off some prisoners from all contact with the outside world. So this is a global phenomenon, but it's a growing issue in Belarus, according to international experts. So when you're incommunicado, prisoners have no contact with their lawyers or family members, which of course is their right. Incommunicado detention is a form of psychological torture designed to have political prisoners think that the outside world has forgotten them. As Olga said just now, it mattered a lot to her to know that those on the outside were working for her release. Because the outside world often cannot locate or even contact these individuals that are incommunicado, prison authorities are able to hide evidence of their mistreatment of political prisoners much more readily. So they can abuse, and they don't have the lawyer coming to visit the prisoner the next day to see the bruises or whatever has been done to him or her. Unfortunately, relatives of political prisoners that are held incommunicado are also left to wonder if their loved ones are still alive. They don't have any way of getting in touch with them or receiving information from them. Incommunicado detention, in our strong view, is inhumane, cruel, and not talked about nearly enough. Next, we'd like to show a graphic that Freedom House prepared for this event. While we pull that up, I'd like to share that according to the human rights group Vyazna, there are currently 8 political prisoners that we know of that are being held incommunicado in Belarus. Freedom House routinely says that we must name their names at every opportunity, so I'll state each one now for the record. Maria Kolesnikova, Mykolai Statkevich, Sergei Tsikhanouskaya, Ihar Losik, Viktor Babarika, Maxim Znak, Polina Sharenda Panasiuk, and Vladimir Hundar. As you can see in this graphic, though, we've not heard from 6 of these 8 individuals for more than a year. What Ms. Tsikhanouskaya did not say in her video that we shared in the beginning of this event is that her own husband, Sergei Tsikhanouskaya, is one of these 6 prisoners being held incommunicado. Ms. Tsikhanouskaya has not heard from her husband in more than a year and is unable to contact him. When a regime holds someone incommunicado and refuses to acknowledge the detainee's whereabouts and fate, the case can officially be considered an enforced disappearance under international law. Additionally, enforced disappearances can constitute a crime against humanity, according to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Okay, we'll go back to our panel now. We can take down this image, but thank you for sharing it. Hanna, this next question is a sad one, and it's for you. So there's a reason for our audience to know why we're holding this event today on June 25th. Today marks 4 years since Ihar Losik, who is a Radio Free Europe journalist, was unjustly detained by the Lukashenko regime. As I stated above, Ihar is unfortunately one of the 8 political prisoners being held incommunicado. We have not heard from him in more than a year. Hanna, I understand that you and Ihar are good friends. I wonder, could you just tell us about Ihar? Like, what is he like? And to the extent that you know, how is he doing? And what kind of efforts are underway to raise awareness about his case and push for his release?
Let me just briefly talk about what happened 4 years ago. And when we, Katie, when we speak about repression against media, we often mention the 9th of August when the presidential election happened back in 2020. But for me, actually, the red line was crossed exactly on that day 4 years ago when 9 security forces officers entered Ihor's apartment with a search warrant. When Ihor was taken to the police station, he was told that he would be released very soon. But actually, on the same day, former Interior Minister Yuri Karayev mentioned in his address to the parliament that it's basically because of YouTube live streams and bloggers that protests, were happening in Belarus. So that's when the regime really launched a war against bloggers, against journalists. And later on the same day and basically in the next 24 hours, other bloggers were also arrested. So it became clear that it would be really dangerous, to be kind of engaged in any journalism since then. And after his arrest, after that situation, it only has gotten worse. When Igor was arrested, basically a few months after that, he was first accused of sort of organizing group actions that disrupt public order, and that was just one accusation. But only a few months later, in December 2020, he heard next sort of 2 criminal charges. And in protest against those charges, he announced a hunger strike. He's been on a hunger strike for 42 days. Imagine, so that's, a huge period of time, and he could have died. And the regime ignored the hunger strike. And instead, in March 2021, there were sort of new charges brought against LaRoque. And when he was informed of this new accusation, he attempted to cut his hands in front of the investigator and his lawyer. Again, nothing really happened. The regime did not release him. The regime did not reconsider the charges. And later in December 2021, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. And to mention his conditions, not only was he deprived of his freedom, he was sent to one of the sort of harshest penal colonies in Belarus, in Novopolotsk. And first, it's known for its kind of dirtiest, conditions when it comes to the environment, but also as one of the harshest, the strictest sort of conditions that the prisoners have there. This is also where Viktor Babarika is serving his sentence, and this is where many of these prisoners are now in Incommunicado mode, and we don't hear about them. So this is kind of one of the worst prisons in Belarus. We don't know what's happening with him right now. So he, since the 20th of February of 2023, his parents has not received any letters, any communication from him. It's not possible to visit him. His lawyer cannot get in touch with him. So basically, we don't really know what's happening there. We heard from other prisoners who were released that he protested against the orders from the administration of the prison, and he attempted again to cut his wrists and to kind of protesting against the treatment that he endured in prison. There was no threat to his life, luckily, but that was his way of protesting. This is unfortunately what many prisoners have to do. So he's now in isolation. We also know that he's been sort of punished. He's been sent to sort of transferred to this punishment cell in prison, which is like a prison inside prison, right? So that's kind of additional pressure on prisoners, and especially on political prisoners. And the prison itself, there are kind of really bad conditions there. Also, people say that it's very cold, even in the summer. And political prisoners are often deprived of warm clothes, they cannot have it. We also heard that Igor doesn't, he cannot buy stuff in prison, even though even if some money, is transferred to him, because it's been taken away by the prison administration to kind of to repay his debt. So he also has a daughter, and he misses her a lot. And this is, this sentence, 15 years, and also isolation, and also the fact that he's away from his daughter, imposed really hard, huge pressure on him. So we are trying to raise as much attention as possible. And thank you very much for this event, and thank you for kind of every initiative that was undertaken to release him and to raise the awareness of his conditions.
Thank you, Hanna. That's heartbreaking, especially when you think about his young daughter and the fact that he has tried to take his own life now twice in protest for his ill treatment and just the cruelty of what he's experiencing. Thank you for sharing that. And I know you're good friends, and so I know it's hard for you too, right? It impacts more than just his direct family. I'd love to turn to you, Olga, next, and perhaps on a slightly happier note, although it is still somber, but when political prisoners are released, the abuse that they've been through, it's not like they're perfectly fine the next day. So what kinds of support do political prisoners need when they get out of prison to readjust to society? And how can governments, international organizations, Belarusian organizations, civil society, how can we help political prisoners when they're released?
I left the pretrial detention center. It was March 2022, but without dropping the charges. So you can imagine freedom was limited. The investigation was ongoing, interrogations continued. In July, I had to answer questions from a state television propagandist for a propaganda film. It was really a serious challenge for me, but this was a condition for the release of my colleague, Elena, who spent 14 months in prison. So, it was really a very bad choice to answer propagandist question or to let your colleague stay in jail. In September, the authorities put us on the terrorist list. So I feel that I am not free, and I understand that the only one way is to leave Belarus. But even then, we didn't leave. We waited until our non-journalist colleagues and top managers involved in our case wrote petitions for their pardon, and Lukashenko signed them. So we were scared that our illegal departure would harm them. So, 13 colleagues waiting for release. It was a really serious reason to stay in Belarus for more than 9 months. And when it became dangerous to delay, we left the country with the help of the Baisol evacuation team. 3 of accused Tudbay employees left Belarus illegally, 10 received pardons, and about half of them have also already left the country. And our editor-in-chief and director were sentenced to 12 years in prison. While I was inside the country, I refused all types of assistance. Most NGOs in Belarus are recognized as extremist organizations. So this assistance is criminalized, and I was scared for me and for my family. People inside the country are afraid to accept help, but it is important for them to know what kind of assistance they can count on if they leave. So my colleagues told me about visas help, about money help, about some programs for former political prisoners. And it was very important. Taking into account the pressure on my relatives, I left Belarus with my whole family, including my 76-year-old mother. So already outside Belarus, several journalistic and human rights organizations provided us with assistance, including Freedom House. So it was very important for us because, the whole family, 6 people, including 2 small kids, without any assistance is too difficult, even if you are not former political prisoner, if you're just moving for business or for traveling, whatever. So this help was really very important. And I was lucky, I was a journalist, and I know where to ask about this information, about some programs, about some assistance. And I know a lot of former political prisoners, including my cellmates. They were unaware, and they're just moving nowhere without any ideas what they're going to do, how to live, and even how to make a visa and how to leave Belarus safely.
Thank you, Olga. Yeah, we need the resources, but we also need to make sure that those that are going through this personally have the information, as you say, to know what resources are even available to them. So yeah, that's a point well taken. Thank you. I'd love to move our conversation a little bit into, before we go to audience questions, and they're starting to trickle in, but don't be shy if you have some. We'll absolutely save time at the end. But what can governments do, like the United States or EU countries, other democratic countries, what can they do to help support the release of political prisoners in Belarus? How do we end arbitrary detention and incommunicado detention specifically in Belarus? I'll ask that, and then I'd also be curious what types of additional assistance you would encourage governments to continue or start providing to those going through this. Perhaps we can do some quick answers to this. I'll go to Hanna first and then Olga.
I'll try to be short. So first of all, the issue of political prisoners doesn't seem to be painful for the regime at the moment. The first painful sanctions that affected the Belarusian regime's economy were implemented only after Ryanair was forced down. And they were implemented, they were sort of announced, but then they came into force only 1 year later. So it took almost 2 years for sanctions to work really. And we don't see many results as of now, but that's because first they were slow. It took a lot of time to implement them. Second, there are many loopholes. And what we need to do now, we need to enforce what Western governments have imposed, right? The sanctions that were imposed in Belarus. We see how different products, different goods, including cars, including car details, and many other things are coming to Belarus, and then they go to Russia. So this must be stopped, because that's kind of gray economy that the regime in Belarus and all kind of enablers are benefiting from. We also see how Belarus is becoming more dependent on Russia when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the obviously military sphere, propaganda, foreign affairs, and so on. And this also should be taken into consideration. So Russia doesn't have to annex Belarus at the moment, because it basically controls it in many spheres. So Russia's danger should be also considered as something that is happening and something that is important. When it comes to political prisoners, they must become a problem, right? All the most painful sanctions were imposed because of Ryanair, because of migration, because of the war. Now, for human rights violations, there are literally no sanctions that are imposed. And this must change. We have also personal sanctions that the list must be longer. There are hundreds of judges that haven't been sanctioned yet, and this should change as well. And when it comes to the families of political prisoners, they also need support. There was this humanitarian fund announced recently, and I hope that the U.S. and other governments would join. Norway has made contributions. Sweden also joined. So I hope for other countries to join as well.
That's a great answer, Hanna. Thank you. Olga, do you want to add anything?
Oh, yes. So I can agree with Hanna that sanction pressure in its current form does not bring good results. So Belarus continues to participate in international trade, successfully circumvent sanctions, and even make money from sanctions imposed against Russia. It's extremely easy to our Belarusian propagandists to make visas, for example, and to visit European Union. I, as former political prisoner, I can't organize such visas for my relatives to visit me, and they make it easily. So at the same time, Belarus continues to interact with international organizations, with our athletes participate in international competitions. So Belarus is following a dangerous path, dangerous for its citizens and for the entire region. And I hope that the international community, and primarily the United States, can convey to the Belarusian authorities that such a policy is unacceptable and increasing international pressure while maintaining communications is especially important. So I can't imagine who personally can communicate with Lukashenko, but it is really extremely important, because now he's speaking just with Lavrov and Putin maybe, and some of his authorities. So we need this communication channel, and it is extremely important to help to our political prisoners. So Lukashenko's regime is doomed, and stopping support for Russian aggression and stopping repressions on his own people is his only opportunity to mitigate his guilt. So, and we must give him this information.
Thank you. Yeah, I find myself agreeing with you both completely, and I'll just take my moderator's prerogative, I suppose, to just add a couple of points that Freedom House has been advocating for on this issue. So I think you're both exactly right. I think that we need to keep in mind that the Lukashenko regime will continue to arbitrarily detain and arrest its own people until they're under enough pressure to stop this practice. At Freedom House, we have been calling this a revolving door of imprisonment, where they'll release a couple of individuals, but then because of just this campaign of repression, they're arresting more on the same day. They will not stop, and they're content to keep us busy with the consequences of their repression, right? We're addressing the impacts of the repression. And we need to support those that have been brutalized by this regime, but we need to remember the source of the problem. I think we need to increase pressure on the regime. And so I echo what you both said. We need to synchronize the sectoral sanctions between Belarus and Russia. We need to focus on closing existing loopholes and mitigating sanctions evasion. And then I would echo, Hanna, what you said about targeted sanctions against individuals involved in political imprisonment. I think we need to deploy increased individual sanctions as part of a comprehensive approach to addressing political imprisonment. And in the United States, we have Global Magnitsky, and we have what's called Section 7031C. Both programs cover enforced disappearances and arbitrary detention. However, even though sanctions are technically covered under both of these laws, it can be challenging to determine from a legalistic standpoint whether a detention is so unfair that it can be considered arbitrary. And so to make things clearer for officials involved in sanctions designations, Freedom House has recommended that the White House issue a proclamation that clearly states that arbitrary detention is considered a serious human rights abuse and gross violation of human rights, so that Global Magnitsky and Section 7031C designations can be more readily applied. We have actually seen this done for conflict-related sexual violence cases, and it's been proven helpful. I also think it's time to get creative. We saw this Norwegian fund. Perhaps we consider ways to start seizing the assets of Belarusian officials behind the detention of political prisoners, and we take their assets and give them to the victims of the regime's repression. I mean, let's get creative. I'll also just quickly add a point on what donors can do. So we have seen donors start to do this, and we are grateful for it, and we think it should continue. We need to continue to provide financial assistance to cover legal expenses incurred by detained human rights defenders and their families. This includes attorney fees, defense expert fees, costs related to legal disputes. Donors can also provide support by funding Belarusian civil society organizations that offer legal services and are often under-resourced. And then I would echo what you both have said about providing humanitarian support to prisoners behind bars and their families. Their families need help too. Support can cover things like relocation, rehabilitation, resocialization support for former political prisoners upon their release. And finally, on Incommunicado detention specifically, I think international outcry and pressure do make a difference. I think we need to raise alarm collectively, but especially from governments, to the perpetrator governments, both publicly and privately. It's critical that disappeared political prisoners' names do not leave the public spotlight. Despite the fact that they are isolated physically, we need to keep their names in the public sphere. In moments like this, we actually do think programs where officials in democratic governments can adopt a political prisoner are actually really great tools, because you have an advocate in government who can continue to highlight what's happening to this person and shine a light on their case. I also think that we need to press for routine, ongoing access to local prisons to assess conditions and make contact with those being held in isolation. In Belarus, we urge the remaining international organizations that are still operating there and diplomats on the ground to demand access to those being held incommunicado. I think, I'll just end with a quick point that we know that pressure works. In fact, we know that pressure works for Belarus specifically. Going back to Svyatlana Tsikhanouskaya in July of last year, in 2023, she actually received an anonymous tip that her husband, Sergei Tikhanovsky, who you'll recall is one of the incommunicado prisoners, she received a tip that he had actually died in prison. And as you can imagine, this caused her to panic, and she released messages. She called upon partner governments, friends. The whole community made noise, demanding to know what happened to Sergei and if he was alive. We actually saw the Lukashenko regime relent, and they ultimately responded by airing footage of her husband, Sergei, on state television, which was therefore offering proof of life. So we've seen it work. We just need to be consistent and not let these individuals' names fade from our attention. Okay, now I'd love to just ask one more question before we go to the audience, and we'll be quick because I know we're running out of time. It's easy, I think, when you listen to all of this to feel overwhelmed about the state of the world and how can I help and everything. But what can individual people do? We talk about what governments can do. What can, an ordinary person do to help those that are imprisoned? Who wants to start?
So I can start. Maybe the only one thing they really can do is to help families of political prisoners. It's too dangerous to help, especially political prisoners, but they have kids, they have old parents, they had a lot of problems in their everyday life. So, just some money, some toys, some assistance for parents, some medical help for parents. It is really very, very useful thing. Now it is summer holidays, and if the kids can have some fun during these holidays, it's also a great deal, and it is very important for people in jail.
Hanna, do you want to add anything?
Agree, absolutely. People can also make a difference. This is not only about governments. Raise the issue of political prisoners as much as you can. Of course, there are many conflicts in the world, and it's, we all understand that, and we are all trying to help and want to help others as well. But in Belarus, due to this massive scale and also human rights violations in Incommunicado modes, it's really important to highlight the issue of each political prisoner. Send letters. I know that some of them don't receive correspondence, but it's also pressure on the prisons administration, right? They also see this attention. They know that we are following. We are kind of we know what you are doing, and we want to sort of highlight the we have not forgotten, right, about political prisoners. Donations are also great, as Volker mentioned. Absolutely agree. Yeah, but tweeting, writing, constantly raising awareness is absolutely crucial.
Thank you both. All right, we'll turn to questions. Let's see if we can rapid fire and get through as many as we can. So David Hoffman with the Washington Post just adds a comment to say, another thing that governments must do is demand proof of life regularly. Completely agree that is essential, especially for those being held incommunicado. We have a question from an anonymous attendee that says, are political prisoners held in prisons with people serving sentences for actual crimes, or are there separate prisons and detention facilities for political prisoners? Does anyone want to take that one?
So I can tell that all prisoners are in one cell, and for example, in my cell was 8 people. 4 of them were political prisoners, and 4 were murderers, drug dealers, and so on. And they got huge terms, up to 18 years in jail. So you can imagine what is the people in our Belarusian jail. It's not just very nice and very intelligent political prisoners.
If I may quickly, so we know that such prisoners in Viktor Babarik and probably Igor Losik are, isolated, so they must be probably in kind of separate cell alone. We heard that prisoners are kind of forbidden to speak with Maria Kolesnikova, right? So even if they want to share some solidarity, right, they cannot do that because they can also be punished by the administration of a penal colony of prison. So prisons are either they might also be overcrowded because of many detainees being put in the same cell. So the conditions are really, really terrible, right? And the conditions in prisons itself are, people don't have fresh air there, and so on and so on. In the summer, it's usually very hot. They also smoke there, so people who don't smoke suffer a lot. So everybody is kind of together. There is no this separation unless somebody is isolated, or political prisoners have this special yellow tags, and they're treated kind of in a more repressive way because they're being tagged as extremist or somebody who is prone to whatever, like fleeing prison or something. So this is something that the administration of prisons also does to political prisoners.
Thank you both. So we have another question here about where do we get the addresses of the prisoners so that we can actually write them. We do have some links that we would love to share. We're also happy to send around a message after this call with some links for where you can write and submit letters to different prisoners. We're happy to do that and would encourage everyone to, if you have some time. There is a question from Catherine. What is the role of the OSCE human rights in Belarus, especially its annual Warsaw Human Rights Conferences? Do either of you want to take that? I'm happy to as well. Maybe.
If you want, you can start. I'll add.
Sure, yeah. So these are important convenings, absolutely essential for particularly civil society groups from Belarus and the international community. Were able to elevate these issues, and Freedom House for the last couple of years has commented on political prisoners in Belarus in this international gathering. I do think that these international mechanisms are an important way to call attention to these issues. We also look to like the UN Special Rapporteur for Belarus for the situation of human rights in Belarus. Whether it's through the OSCE or from these special rapporteurs from the United Nations, these are ways to get on the record what these issues are and have them be at the attention of other governments and warrant more attention. Hanna, do you want to add anything? She froze just a little bit.
Apologies for my internet connection and also for the sounds. I'm traveling right now. So yeah, so regarding the OSCE, there have been 2 Moscow mechanism reports that are really important, and hopefully I think what we should kind of aim for is for states, for governments to ensure full implementation of the recommendations that were made in these reports. And also there was doesn't like. It kind of brings some trust to them because
Hanna, we're losing you. And I will note that we are at time. So I do want to say for those that are still with us, Radio Free Europe is dropping in the links into this chat where you can reach out to political prisoners, and we will also send them around after the fact. I want to thank everyone for your attention and for joining us today. I hope that you feel inspired to take some steps to reach out to those that are imprisoned, to ask our own governments to do more to seek their release. Thank you very much for helping us make noise about this issue, and we hope to see you next time at our next event. Thank you.